Let's talk money.
I don't have your money.
I know I'd be a lot happier with some extra cash.
Is this about money?
Obviously, this is all about money.
Oh, man, we got bills to pay, buddy.
With practical tips and a focus on Scripture, let's talk money. With Dave and Reb. From More Than Enough. Real conversations about money for real people. Let's talk money.
Are you ready to talk money, Reb?
I'm ready to talk money. You feel really far away.
Well, I don't know. Should we move closer?
I don't know. Will didn't tell us,
so
but
we're already getting started with adjustments in the show. So welcome to the show. This is the show where we talk about the hard issues of money and God and all kinds of things. I'm Dave.
Reb.
Yes, and this is when I am. This morning, I'm excited because in the studio, and Reb, you said it on the way in, I think we just love having the guests that we are because our good friends come and we get to say, okay, let's just sit down at the table and talk. And we don't get the opportunity to do that. So the podcast is like an excuse to be able to have
visit.
These conversations.
That's really terrible that we wait till the podcast to do these things.
And we are so happy that you join us and sit in with us, grab your coffee and join in the conversation because, yeah, that's really where it's at. So welcome to the show, Brent.
It's so good to be here with my friends. And it doesn't happen often enough because, yeah, you have some kids, I have some kids, and life is busy.
And we
right?
just found out we had a little trip recently, and we were like, we were a week apart visiting, but we went down to the bottom of Florida, and you were there too.
Basically the exact same area.
I know,
right?
It's so funny.
You're so wise. You choose the best places to go. Right?
There we go. Oh my goodness.
No, so anyway. Okay, that's that. Anyway.
Yes, welcome to the show. And thank you, Brent. I mean, we've got you on the show, but you're also sponsoring today's show. So you are the lead at Crosspoint Financial, an Ottawa-based financial boutique. I think we can call it a boutique. So, and that's, of course, why we have you on the show. We get you in the studio because you're local, but we also get to glean all that wisdom in all things wealth generation, investing, and even, that whole tax planning part and investments and all that. You are like, so we're fun. We're so glad to have you.
Such a great.
We're not going to go all those places today, but certainly your team at Crosspoint Financial that's what you do all day long. So
that is what we do. Yeah, it's fun. It's exciting. Lots of things going on all the time. And it's great to be here to share a few of those thoughts with you today.
Cool. So if you want to check out Crosspoint Financial, crosspointfinancial.ca is the website. Of course, all the things in terms of contact, everything, that's the best place to go for that. So
for sure.
Again.
And that'll be in the show notes too. So, but we picked verses today out of Colossians because we actually had a big discussion recently, like in prep for today's show, like just where do we go with this? Like we want to talk today about what's happening in the investment world, what's happening with interest rates and how does inflation and all of that play a part? Because a lot of the narrative we're getting in our world is like, it's scary, it's hard. And we just wanted maybe to look at it from another perspective. And we also wanted to bring in like the purposes of why we would want to generate income through investing. And some of the good things, because after talking with you, I'm like, oh man, this can be a really exciting place in this season to think about investment and earning interest and using it for a purpose to better community, like we were just thinking about those things as we talked. So, but before we get there, there's a scripture verse in Colossians 3:23 and 24 that you are going to read, David, out of the Passion Translation, but it's the one where it talks about whatever you do it with all your heart as unto the Lord. And I will say, sometimes I throw that at my children. You got to do that chore, do it as unto the Lord, one of those terrible Christian mother things that we do.
Yeah, way to motivate.
Way to motivate her.
We're not even going to go there. This is not Dave and Reb talk about parenting skills. So this is
okay. Fair enough.
Colossians chapter 3, verse 23, and again, I'm reading from the Passion version, just because it gives it a little different perspective. It says, "Put your heart and soul into every activity that you do, as though you were doing it for the Lord Himself, and not merely for others. For we know that we will receive a reward, an inheritance from the Lord, as we serve the Lord Yahweh, the Anointed One.
So this can be misinterpreted in light of our conversation today, because we are not telling you invest your money and God's going to bless you. We're not telling you that. It's not a prosperity line of thinking. But what I was thinking when I was reading these scriptures is we don't often think that we can invest our money as if it's a part of our discipleship journey with Christ. And that's what I wanted to pull out, because if we put it in the right context of his kingdom and what Jesus taught, use ungodly mammon to be a shrewd steward. Use it so that we can put it to the purposes of the kingdom. And I think that can be a really exciting thing. So that is why I brought those verses in. And I don't know if you had any thoughts about that.
I guess, a few. I mean, it goes back to when I was a kid. My parents said the same thing, and yet it didn't stick with me in a bad way. I think everything that I do today, I do try to remember that, right? Like, what does it mean to give advice to someone when you're sitting across the table? And I often go back to, maybe it's not just about the money, right? There's a lot of practical things we can do, from taxes and estate planning and how to invest really well, and the research that we do into picking businesses that we think will grow and grow people's capital for them. But you pick up on so many other things, like you start with their goals and their dreams, but you pick up on fears or hurts or issues inside their family or other things they're worried about, right? And the conversation inevitably moves to more about what we call the purpose of the money, right? Like, and finding the meaning behind it, the why. Why are we doing this? And when you get into that, and not everybody does, right? Because I don't think everybody has gone there to think through it. But I love that element of, as if I'm working under the Lord, I'm doing these things practically that is of excellence and good advice and solid research-based things. But there's a reason behind why we're doing it that goes to the heart, I think. And I love it when that part comes out.
I just love, because so often, at least from our experience, the idea of relationship with Christ, with our Father, with the mysterious Trinity of God, and then bringing money into it. Like, I always joke when I'm speaking in a group, we have money and we have God, and we're bringing them together in a conversation. The two least likely things people want to talk about, like outside of politics, right? So here we are, and Let's Talk Money is all about that. But that's why I'm like, let's talk about investing. What's happening now with the interest rate? And are there some good things? Because we're hearing from the debt side, it's not so good. My mortgage payments are going up. But in your world, what's happening right now?
Well, I guess it's maybe a bit of a history lesson in one sense, that we see the effects of what's going on right now. And we as people, especially if we don't understand it, which I think the average person does not understand what's going on from an economic perspective. But you really do have to go back quite a ways to see, how did we get here? So, I mean, really, really far, I guess, if you go back to, like, what is the purpose of money? And I would just argue for a minute there that money itself is just an inanimate object that is representative of your labor, right? So if I'm going to go to work today, exchange a few hours of work for money, that money is a representation of the trade-off I made to not choose to do something else, right?
Right.
And when the controllers of money in our modern economic system, that's the central banks, when they change the quantity of money in the system, or they change the interest rate, which is really the cost, it'll cost you to go get some money, to borrow some money, you're changing its worth, right? If I were to say, you've got these $10 to spend, and all of a sudden I secretly put another $10 over here and I spread it over to someone else, that $20 is now chasing the same goods that were here, right? And it pushes the price up. If I lower the cost of borrowing money by lowering interest rates, more and more people can borrow more money with the same wages, right? My salary didn't go up, but all of a sudden it cost me less to borrow. That excess or increase in borrowing pushes the price of objects that they're trying to purchase up as people chase them, right? So you can go back hundreds of years and look at the effect of this over time. But just going back to really 2008. A lot of people remember that, the great financial crisis. It was one of the first big shocks of there's too much debt in the system. And the response was to increase the quantity of money and to lower interest rates to the floor as much as they could to, again, lessen the burden of debt. Well, that has an inflationary effect, a huge inflationary effect, but it didn't happen right away, right?
Wow.
Because there were these other deflationary forces, right? Housing prices were coming down. People lost their jobs. And then we kind of grew out of it and things were looking good again in 2018. And so like a decade later, and then COVID hit, and that was another deflationary. Everybody stayed home. There was a spike in housing because what did they do when COVID hit? They lowered interest rates even further. So it was down to about, you would know better than I, but about 1.5% you could get a mortgage for, right? Well, you've gone from like my 25 years of owning a house of 10% interest on my first mortgage down to 1.5%. There's no question. Inflation gets pushed up by that effect, right? And so I think it's important for people to remember that inflation really at the end of the day is a monetary phenomena. We have lots of other reasons now. People, you're going to hear it's about the bad corporations and all. And there are bad corporations. People are always doing bad things, but we're trying to blame someone for it instead of recognizing it's been our monetary policy for a very long time of increasing money supply, lowering interest rates that's created this. I've actually been shocked it hasn't been an issue sooner. Yeah. It's shocking to me. I kept saying,
and to interrupt, but I mean, we've been talking about get your house in order for 15 years at More Than Enough going, why are we talking about this? Because this is going to happen. Yeah. It's just taken till 2022, 2023 to get here, right? But the reality is we, you see this coming and you see the impact it's going to have on the Canadian family and on its cost of things and all of that, and go, we need to minimize our debt. We need to push that down. And unfortunately, the More Than Enough voice didn't have the impact I would have loved. Because
it needs to be louder.
When it hurts, then you have movement, right? So there's some.
It's too late then, though, right?
It feels sometimes like that, but there's always good things to do. But so what's like? Are your clients like? I know you're a high end you have high-end monetary clients, they've got a bit of cash. So, maybe they're not suffering with the debt part, but is there more investment happening? Are you happier with what you're able to do because the interest has gone up that much more for you right now?
Yeah, so I do want to recognize that, right? That we do work with people who have excess capital and have saved a lot. But the truth of that can be applied to anybody with any kind of amount of money, right? So and the people who have that money, I think a lot of them just worked really, really hard to accumulate it, right? And foregone expenditures, really, right? And I saw this in COVID when I heard so many people saying, I just need a bigger house. I'm working from home. My kids I need something bigger. I need bigger. And look, interest rates are low. I'm going to buy it. And we didn't prepare, like you guys were saying. We consumed, right? And I think that's in your heart, probably the first thing to say with every consumption. And not that it's all bad, but it's just being really thoughtful and mindful and prayerful. Is this really something that I'm supposed to be doing right now, right? Because now, a few years later, interest rates go up. And I'm actually, from an economic perspective, they didn't want that to happen, but I'm really thankful that it happened. If I go back to just reminding the listeners, interest rates are a representation of the cost of your labor. And if you're thinking more in terms of like a person who's aligned to more union government control, that's a good thing. Like your labor is being represented fairly now by a higher cost of capital. That is your labor, right? And it will stop the skewing of prices because it costs me something now to go borrow more money to buy that object. So higher interest rates are linked to inflation 100%. If everybody ever wasn't sure about that, you can basically go back and see they are exactly the same thing. The inflation rate and interest rates mirror each other, and they're lagging. Interest rates lag inflation. So inflation goes up, interest rates will go up to try to slow the inflation down. Okay. Now, from an investment perspective, that means we can now get a return on capital that we a few years ago could not get. We were getting 1.5% or so on a GIC or a bond, but inflation we knew was that, if not more. right? Now we're getting 5 on a GIC or a bond or high interest, give or take 1 or 2%. And now the key thing to remember is people can get excited about that, but that's because they're anchoring back to a year and a half ago at 1.5, thinking, why would I ever invest my money with risk? Now I'm getting 5. It's because inflation is 4.5, 5, right? And so your real return, what we have to think about is what's my return above the inflation rate? Yep. But this does give us a foundation to work from that is now thankfully higher. And the key thing I wanted to point out today for people is that there's always been a relationship between risk return and that inflation or risk-free rate. Mm-hmm. So a GIC, say, and buying shares of a company that's growing. Historically, probably over at least 100 years, it's been about 3 to 4% excess return over the risk-free rate to invest your money in a good quality business. Mm-hmm. There can be other factors, right? The business doesn't do well, but so portfolio diversification and different sectors and all that stuff. But just generally speaking, risk return relationship or inflation rate, so low risk, taking no risk with your money and then taking risk and buying a good business with that, 3 to 4% excess return. So about a year and a half ago, when interest rates were 1.5%, the expected return in our risk portfolios was about 4 to 4.5, right? That spread above the risk-free rate. Not very high, but that's kind of what people now are saying, yeah, that seems normal. Well, now that interest rates are 5%, that expected return of good businesses is more like 8 to 9, right? And that's not to be that kind of advisor that says, oh, I can get this for you. Like if you hear someone saying that, run as fast as you can. I was at the gym the other day, last night. I'm a middle-aged guy. I've got to work out a little more now to try to never have before. Got to, press and push some iron up every once in a while. But the guy that I'm working with, because I need a coach, I need a trainer, right? That's my life lesson in everything. When I don't understand everything, someone else will teach me, right? So just like you guys are coaches on money. But he was telling me there was this finance person promising their group like 20% returns. And I said, you got to run. Like that guy, no way. That's nuts. And no one should ever be promising rates of return. There's zero sort of academic thinking behind that. If your value add is, here's what I can get for you, that's scary. There's so much ego in that and lack of understanding of just how the system works, that it's like I talked about a second ago, it's these relationships between inflation and interest rates and then good businesses that grow over meaningful long periods of time. That's how you grow capital. And then relating it back to our verse of the day and talking about like worldview as a Christian, the question of what's the purpose of that? What is God asking you to do with that excess capital, that income now that can be generated off of it? There's so much good that you could maybe consider doing. So finding the purpose for that money is a big part of what we spend time with our clients doing. And anybody listening can kind of think through that and think, how could I use that income?
Yeah, I think that, again, it resonates so beautifully with what we talk about here on the podcast a lot is what is the hard issue around money, but, linking that to the word purpose and saying, I can make all kinds of money or I can invest or I can work hard and exchange time for money and all of that. But if the goal is just to have a bigger pot at the end of the day, yeah, okay. We want to put some purpose behind that to say, okay, the purpose is, whether it's, well, I want to make sure my, and these are the common ones I hear, I'm sure you do too, but, I want to make sure my family is cared for after I pass away. I want to make sure that my wife and I are cared for when we don't have the ability to exchange time for money. Those are pretty common purposes, but to dig a little bit deeper into that and to say, okay, once you've reached that, what else? How else do we manage that?
I'm just thinking like that folks might be listening and thinking, well, I'm totally not in a position that I can even like this is just way beyond me. It's great. We often say, well, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer in certain seasons. But I think I want to encourage people to have that thinking. You may have your two mites. You may have what you think I don't know, it kind of makes me want to cry today. You may have your 5 loaves and 2 fish, and you're coming to the Lord and saying, like, maybe I could take a bit of it and put it in an investment space because there's something more that you want to do with this. And I think I just want to ask the Lord to open our minds about the tool of money. What did you call it? You didn't use it a tool. You said it was, I don't know. I have to go re-listen to what you just said, but at the beginning. I used the word
an inanimate object.
Yeah, it's just a thing, an exchange for the work you do and the value it has. And sometimes I think we need to consider more often, Lord, what do you want me to do with this today? And let's just go back to the investing part a minute. Like, does this make you happy when the interest rates go up? Like, I know this is a personal thing, but it's just like, oh, good, we can give more returns to our clients. But
yeah, yes, yes, it does.
Yeah, I'm just asking you an honest question. But.
Although it is very much spread out over periods of time, right? As humans, we're so near-term focused. So when interest rates have gone up right now, that caused a bit of a slowdown in the markets in the short term, right? Because businesses with loans, with debt, have higher cost of capital. The inflation was pushing up the cost of labor for them, have to pay people more, cost of goods, like the grocery store chains were having higher input costs, fuel costs were going up to transport. Like, so earnings get compressed in the short term, just like a household. People listening to this have probably felt their earnings have been compressed in the short term too, because costs have gone up.
Yes.
The key for investing for us, and where long-term this makes sense, why we think this is a good thing, is that companies who are selling something that we need no matter what and have pricing power or the ability to increase revenues, would I say that? And that's where I think every household needs to look at that too. Their costs and how else can I increase revenue, right? To keep that spread high. And I don't know what that is for every person, but we do have to take responsibility for that in some way. This is the environment we're in now. How do we react to it? How do we stay strong, resilient financially? Increasing revenue is a part of that not everybody can do, and I get that. There's probably a broad audience listening to this, but that's one of the levers. And otherwise we feel, if it's just the cost side, we feel out of control on that, right? So we do have to look at the costs, just like when we're investing in a business. We're looking at people who are, like, businesses are allocating capital wisely. How can I cut costs? How can I, keep things under control there in order to keep growing the net difference between the two?
One of the things that you have taught me over the years in our discussions, because I'm like very unaware about investing, or I have been, and you've been, you and Ruben, what's his name? Morgan Housel. It's Morgan Housel.
Psychology of Money.
Psychology of Money.
Excellent book if you haven't read it.
I just love that book. Anyway, when we ever talk about investing, I talk about him because he said one of his points is you got to be in for the long-term game. And you can't be afraid that when the markets dip or things shift, you just got to hold on, right?
Absolutely.
But now I can't remember. Now that I'm talking about Morgan Housel, I can't remember what I was going to ask you. But you have taught me a lot about responsibility. Why? Okay, so this goes back to that, the responsibility you just mentioned. Even if I have an investor like you, I come to you, I think I still have a responsibility as a steward. Let's throw that Christian word in there, or that earth word, a responsibility to care for what we have been given. Whether we think it's lots or little, God is still, Scripture says He's given us each the ability to generate wealth. Somewhere in Proverbs, I think He says that.
Deuteronomy.
Deuteronomy. Okay, so yes, sorry, it is Deuteronomy. And I remember hearing someone speak on that years ago, and I was utterly convicted because I felt like, oh, well, I just don't earn enough. So it's actually, what you earn is God's gift to you. And your ability to generate wealth is a gift. And you have resources. We talk about this all the time. It's time, talent, gifts, expertise, money. We have all those 5 things. And I'm just wondering, how do you take responsibility in the investment thing. Like if someone's listening and saying, well, I have an investment guy, I just leave it up to him. Like we still have to be aware. I still have to know what you're doing, Brent, if I give you money. Like
I would think so. I think it's in anything in life when we don't understand something, we shy away from it and we say, well, that's not for me to understand. But I would encourage everybody that it's just a journey to start on educating yourself and slowly trying to understand more and more. And then you feel empowered to at least supervise who you've hired to do that and understand what they're doing and why. So continually asking questions, like being curious is probably the first piece of advice I would give to people. Is just never stop learning and keep trying to understand. Don't shrink away from it if you feel that pull to, I need to understand this, right?
I'm going to interrupt because I think it's really important. There's two things. One is that we use money every day. It is that method and medium of exchange. And in a sense, it's a tool that every single one of us who is here living, we have to learn to manage. And so this is part of just, hey, growing up and being part of that journey of maturing is going, hey, I started with a little bit of money and I managed it and then I saved some money or whatever you did. It accomplished the purpose that you wanted it to accomplish. And so I think, what we're talking about here is really part of that responsibility is just saying, yep, I at least need to have a baseline or an understanding, and then learning something we use every day. Yes, we want to get better and better and understand more. I'm never going to be as understanding as you are, but, going that. And I think I want to end with this thought just as we're wrapping up.
Are we already at the end?
Yeah, we're wrapping up already.
Really? Oh, Will's nodding at me in the little...
He gave the wrap up sign here.
Brent probably knew that and I totally didn't. Okay, go ahead.
I'm thinking about the parable of the talents as the last, there were 10, there were 5, there were 1, but the responsibility is still the same. it is not about the number. We often say it's just zeros to God. The zero in the end. It's whether it's $10, $100, $1,000, $10,000, or $1 million. Again, it's just zeros when it comes to. We still need to be responsible with what the Lord has given us, and in a sense, going with that perspective and how Scripture links that to Deuteronomy. God gives us all the ability to create wealth, and some of us He gives 1 talent and 2 talents and 5 talents and 10 talents and linking that together.
But that goes back to the purpose thing too, right?
And to glorify God, right? With whatever we have.
Yeah. So, Lord, thank you. I thank you for men and women like Brent in our world who love the investing side of things and who can teach us so much. Thank you for Brent this morning. And help us have ears to hear and eyes to see that we will face our finances and take responsibility with what you have given to us and the ability to generate wealth. Thanks so much, Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Brent, for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you for sponsoring the show and CrossPoint Financial. And thank you for joining us, and join us next time when we talk money.
Let's Talk Money is a division of More Than Enough Financial Fitness, where God is transforming hearts and bringing hope for today and freedom for tomorrow. For more information or to comment on today's show, please visit morethanenough.ca.